Hi, I'm Mike Beliveau, and today I'm at one of my reloading benches. And what I want to talk about today is the initial setup of reloading dies. Now, I've done a number of reloading videos over the years, and people always point out to me that I'm just loading the ammo. The dies are already set up. All I do is pull the lever and things happen, and that really doesn't help them get started. And I understand that. But of course, I'm not tearing apart one of my setups that's dialed in just to show you how to do it. So, luckily, I've got to load a cartridge I've not loaded before. 38 Smith & Wesson, which I'm loading for some pocket revolvers. And I'm going to load both black powder and smokeless powder for this cartridge because I have 20th century guns chambered in it, and I have 19th century guns chambered in it. So it seemed like a good opportunity to show you how to set up reloading dies. So first, let's explain what reloading dies are and what basically, when you buy them, how do they come? Well, this is a typical handgun reloading die set. This one happens to come from Lee Precision, but if you got it from Lyman or RCBS or Redding, you'd be getting pretty much the same thing. Now, this is a 3-die set. I'm going to go through each of these dies, and you can get 4-die sets as well, and I actually prefer those, but you can't find them from every manufacturer or even in every caliber from manufacturers who do make them. Well, before I talk about the dies that come in the set, I want to talk about a piece that's included in this set, but it may not be included in every die set from every manufacturer. Typically, Lee provides the shell holders, which is what this is, and most of the other manufacturers do not. So the shell holder is a little tiny piece of gear that attaches to the ram of your press and allows you to hold the rim of the shell to move it in and out of the dies. And if you don't have one of these, you're never getting that shell out of the die. So if it does not come with your reloading die set, if you're buying online, the description of the set should tell you if it's included or not. If it does not, then go to the manufacturer's website and find the appropriate size shell holder for the cartridge that you're reloading. And they'll usually be numbered. And then you can order that shell holder from the manufacturer or from whatever retailer you're working with. Now, as I said before, this is a 3-die set. And the first die in the set is the resizing die. And you can tell that because it's going to have a pin sticking out of the bottom of it. And that's what knocks the spent cap out of your shell. And what this die does is it brings the fired cartridge case back into factory spec. It's going to expand to the extent of your chamber when it fires. And this brings it down to the size the cartridge should be. Now, for handguns, most of these are going to be carbide dies, as long as it's a parallel-sided handgun cartridge. In other words, not a bottlenecked cartridge or a tapered cartridge. And that's good because it means you do not have to lube the cartridge cases before resizing them. But if you're doing something like a 4440, which is bottlenecked, you can't get carbide sizing dies for that. So you're going to have to apply some case lube to it before you size it. Otherwise, it'll get stuck in the die. And if it doesn't get stuck in the die, it's going to probably overstretch because of the friction. So you do want to lube those. But in a carbide dyed set, you don't need any lube on the cartridge case at all, and that's the fact of this one, the 38 Smith & Wesson one. Now, the second die in your set is the case mouth expander die. And this is a die that's going to put a little bell at the end of your cartridge case so you can start the bullet in it. Right? That flare is going to be closed up again by the bullet seating and crimping die. But you need that flare, particularly with lead bullets. Otherwise, they're not going to seat straight. You're going to shave lead off of the side. A lot of bad things happen. So you want to be able to expand that shell. Now, with the Lee Precision, they are hollow, and you can use them to pour powder right into your shell after you've expanded the case mouth. and that is a great feature. You won't find that on most other manufacturers. You'll expand the case mouth, you'll drop the ram, and then you'll pull the bullet off and put powder in and put it back on, pull the shell casing off. But with the Lee, you can put a funnel on the top of that, as I'll show you later, and you can put powder in while you're expanding the case mouth. Now the third and final die with this set is the bullet seating and crimp die. So this die actually does two functions. It's easily recognizable because it has a knurled cap on top that adjusts how deep the bullet seating plunger goes. So it'll be readily identifiable as a seating die, even though it should say it along the side of the die. So like I said, this is the one we're going to use to both seat the bullet and crimp it. Now if you got a 4-die set, the 4th die would be a crimping die. So you would seat the bullet with this die and you would crimp with the next die. But in this case, we have a 3-die set, and this is everything involved. And just while I'm talking to you, those of you who watched last week's video know that I came down with a bout of COVID, not the worst case ever, by the way. And I've gotten a lot of wishes from you for my recovery and wanting to know how I'm doing. So I'm just going to tell you, I am almost completely over it now. I feel quite good. I just have a little bit of a cough. I'm still trying to shake, but by and large, I'm doing fine. And it was about, like a cold, really. So I'm doing okay. Don't worry. I'll be around for a while. Okay, so this is one of my reloading benches. I call it my Harry Potter bench because it's built under my cellar staircase. And this bench is kind of interesting because I have a Lee bench plate mounted here that this press is locked into. And I've got that because it allows me to switch out presses or accessories like case trimmers, lubricizers, things like that. So I'm going to be showing you how to set up these dies on a Lee turret press. And I think the Lee turret press is probably the best buy for beginning reloaders. A lot of people start off with a single stage press. Okay, here is a single stage press, and it would mount into that bench plate right there. And it's the difference is this turret has 4 holes for dies. The single stage press takes 1 die at a time. So you'd get the first die dialed in, you'd lock everything down, you would take it out, dial in the next die, lock everything down, take it out, dial in the next die. And quite simply, you would load a batch of ammo by doing 1 step at a time. First, you would resize all of your cases. Then you would flare the case mouth on all of your cases, put powder in to all the cases, and then seat the bullet on all the cases one at a time, right? All sequentially. So when you use a turret press, basically you're doing the same thing, except you do each operation in sequence on the same round. So first you'll resize it, then you'll expand the mouth and you'll put powder in, then you'll seat the bullet and you'll crimp it, and that whole round is done. Put it in the bin. So it goes a little bit faster. It's not as fast as a progressive, but to be honest with you, it's less finicky than a progressive. And unless you're the kind of competitive shooter who shoots 1 match every weekend, and I know plenty of guys who do that, so that you go through and practice sessions during the week, so you literally go through thousands of rounds of ammunition every month, then a progressive is good for you. But even if you're a competitive shooter, if you're like a 1 weekend a month or 2 weekends a month shooter, you can get everything you need loaded on this pretty quickly and with a lot less headaches. Okay, so I'm going to take the primer feed off of this because we're not going to use it right now. And I'm going to show you how to set up the dies. And of course, we're going to start off with a bullet seating die and go from there. But what we're going to do is we're going to make a dummy round. And that is absolutely what you want to do. Make up 1 or 2 dummy rounds. And when you got those dialed in, then you can start loading real ammo. And if you feel like it's wasteful to make up dummy rounds because you won't shoot them, just get yourself one of these inertial bullet pullers, and you can disassemble your dummies and load them up with real powder and primers and be good to go, not waste anything. But you should always start with loading dummies. Before you start loading ammo, the most important thing you can get is one of these, a reloading manual or a reloading handbook. This one's Hornady. They're made by Speer, Norma. Lots of companies make them. They're very exhaustive. Each company pushes its own components. So this, of course, will use Hornady bullets. And that might not always fit the bill of what you're doing, which is why it's good to have several of them. But this will tell you your safe charges, your overall lengths, all sorts of information you need to know. And like I say, it's good to have more than one. And if you're like me and you load a lot of obsolete ammo and a lot of handgun ammo that uses cast bullets, the Lyman Cast Bullet Handbook is one of the best going because it does list a lot of obsolete cartridges and it gives you a good cast bullet loads. Now these are all based on Lyman molds, but 145 grain mold from one company will load the same as a 145 grain bullet from somebody else's mold, right? So the powder charges and all that are good places to work from here. So don't load blind, always load from a manual, and that way you won't blow yourself up. All right, because this is a Harry Potter bench, space here is definitely at a premium. But let's get to work. So the first thing I'm going to do, okay, so I already told you about the shell holder. Very important. And this is your ram, the part that goes up and down. Right, so the shell holder is going to fit in a slot in the ram. Now, if you're using one of these Lee Progressives, what you're going to find is that the primer arm is built in there. And when you come down the downstroke after resizing, that's how you load the primer. Okay? So the first die that we're going to set up is going to be the sizing die. And like I told you, that has the decapping pin on it. And that one is impossible to get mixed up with anything because of that. So we're just going to screw that in to the turret head here. And here's how simple this is to set up. Of course, this will, you always have expansion when you fire a round. So we need to bring it back into spec. And we need to get rid of that spent primer. And that's what this die does. So we just put the cartridge in there. We would go up. Now the key about this one, there we go. Okay, the key of this one, I'm going to show you in just 1 second. Okay, you want the bottom of the die to be just touching the top of the shell holder when the ram is extended all the way. And that's exactly what we've got here. So that's just how you want the resizing die to be. Okay, now you can see right here is the locking ring. Now, these are Lee dies, and Lee dies have a pressure locking ring. Some other die sets, like, let me see. Like this Lyman set has a locking ring that that basically has a set screw in it, right? So either one works. The set screw is more positive, I won't lie about that, but I've never had a problem with the Lee locking rings. They use an O-ring to tension down. And just on the subject of dies, I reload close to 30 different calibers, I guess, and I have die sets from everybody. I've got Lyman, I've got RCBS, probably have some renting stuff around here. All sorts of different guys. They all work fantastically. Lee dies and Lee equipment is generally quite a bit less expensive than the other brands. Often it's only half the price. And a lot of people think that means it's got bad quality. But I'm here to tell you, it does not. Every die set I've ever used, RCBS, Lyman, Lee, they have all been outstanding. And it may be that, say, an RCBS die set is better than a Lee die set. And what that means is that your great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren will still be using it. Whereas the Lee set, maybe only your great-great-grandchildren will be using it. Okay? So I think you get the point. Value for money, Lee, I think, is the way to go. And that's not to denigrate the others, because the others are outstanding, but Lee is outstanding too, and for a lower price. So Lee has this knurled lock ring. So I'm going to keep everything in place, right? I've got the cartridge in there, it's in the right spot. So now I'm going to lock this down by turning this ring until it locks against my turret plate. Now I keep these all the way up because I don't know where the adjustment point's going to be until, obviously, I have tested it on a cartridge case. Okay, there we go. All the way down. Now here's where that shell holder comes in handy. Right, if you didn't have a shell holder, you could never get that case out of the die. Right, but out it comes. It's sized, and the primer pocket is empty. Oh, voila. Now, some people ask, if I've got new brass, say you went out and you bought new brass, you don't have once fired brass, do I still need to resize it? And the answer to that is, yes, you do. And not only should you resize it, but you should get a tool like this. And this is a case deburring tool. Right? And before I would have resized it, if this was new brass, I would have taken this, the cone shaped part, and I'd have deburred the inside, and I'd have taken this part and deburred the outside. Because newly made brass often is full of edge burrs, and that just does nothing good for you at all. So yeah, you want to resize new brass, and you want to actually prep the cases before you resize them. Right, so that's the resizing step. Now, if I had this little helix installed, this turret would auto-rotate, but I don't want it to do that now because I'm just setting it up. So I'm going to manually rotate it. And I'm going to set up the next die station. And the next die is the case mouth expander die. Okay, now for Lee, the Lee dies are made so that you can put a powder measure on it, or you can put a funnel on it and dipper the stuff in. And I like that. So it works very well on a progressive or on a turret press like this. And as you can see back here, right, I think you can see a bunch of these. In fact, hold on, let me pull this off. Okay, you look back here, all of these are turrets that have automatic powder measures on them for those calibers. Okay, so those are all smokeless calibers back there. Most of them are semi-auto pistol or M1 carbine or, you know, whatever. And I've got powder measures on them. Now, on this die set, I'm not going to put an automatic powder measure on because I'm going to load some with black powder and some with smokeless powder. So I'm going to dipper the black powder, and the smokeless powder I'm going to use an external powder measure for it to measure the charges. All right, so inside of here, you can see it sticking out the bottom. Right here is the case mouth expander. So what we want to do is we want to bell that case mouth so that we can start a bullet in it and not shave off any lead. All right, I'm just going to kind of get this started in here. I don't know how far I've got to go, so I'm just going to try it. Okay, now, the way you know if it's working or not is how easily you can start a bullet in it. All right, so this is a little bit tight. I might be shaving lead, so I'm going to go a little bit farther. All right, so that means I'm going to drop it about a turn. Do it again. Try a bullet. Okay, now that is a little bit better. And in fact, if that was a jacketed bullet, I would probably stop right there. But it's not. And I could use a little more expansion. So I'm just going to go down. Oops. Probably didn't pick up much more on that. Doesn't feel like it. Nope, about the same. So I'm going to go down about 2 more steps. So there's a lot of trial and error with this. Alright, that felt like it probably did it. Yes. Alright, so if you can see this, right, now it gets started. And it'll stay centered on its own. That's what I want. Okay, you don't need excessively flared. But I'll tell you, as long as you can get into the seating die will size that back out before it goes into crimp. Okay, so we got this guy nailed down now. I'm going to run the shell back up. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the sizing die. I'm going to screw that locking lug down. Okay, now we've got the final die. This is a 3-die set. Right, and this is the seating and crimping die. Typically, I like to seat and crimp on 2 separate dies. And I would usually get a factory crimp die for this caliber, but they'll sell it for .38 Smith & Wesson. So I'm going to do it all on this one. Now, sometimes what I've done actually is I've bought 2 of these die bodies. I just buy an extra one because I sell them as parts. And I'll crimp on one and seat on the other. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to show you how to set this up. But I'll tell you how to set it up if there's 4. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the bullet seating plug, right, which is this top thing. I'm going to put this all the way up. Now I'm going to tell you, the easiest way to do this is if I had a factory bullet, I'd sling it on there and I'd set everything up for the factory completed cartridge. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you the way to go with this thing all the way. So I've got my expanded case mouth, and I don't want to mess with that. So I'm just going to take another shell. I'm going to put it on the shell holder. All right, I'm going to turn the locking lug all the way up. Screw this in just to get it started. Well, I can see it showing below the level of the turret. Okay, I'm there. All right, so I'm going to raise this up. I'm going to lower the turret. I'm going to keep spinning this down until I feel it hitting the crimp shoulder. Okay, so inside here, the case is the outside shell diameter, and then it steps down to the bullet diameter. So what I want to do is get it up to the crimp groove, and now I'm going to back it off a little bit because I don't want to crimp now. So I'm just going to back it off a little bit. Right? I can feel where it's crimping. Now it's not crimping. Okay. Now I'm going to take this back out of here, and I'm going to take my expanded case mouth, and I'm going to put a bullet on it. Now, most bullets would have a crimp groove. This one does not. This one's kind of like a semi-auto bullet. So I measured the overall length of a 38 Smith & Wesson cartridge, and I determined how much of the bullet has got to be outside of the case. And what I want to be sure of is, right, the bullet is parallel-sided, right, and then it curves up. That's called the ogive of the bullet. I don't want to crimp on the ogive because I won't get a good purchase on it. Right, so I want to crimp where it's still parallel-sided. So I marked a line there. Okay, so what I want to do right now is this step is going to be all about seating the bullet. And if I don't get the bullet seated to the proper depth the first time, I don't want it crimped over because I want to go back and adjust the seating depth. And that's why I backed off on the crimping die. I got it up to the crimp step, and then I backed it off a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to go up. I'm going to see what it does. Okay. All right, so if you can see that line on the bullet, and it's kind of faint, I've got about 1/8 of an inch still to seat. I want that line to be even with my brass. So I'm going to take my seating plug, and I'm going to give it a turn. Okay, so I'm almost there now. This is why I didn't crimp it, because I don't want to be pushing it down into a crimp case and wrecking it. I'm going to take my seating plug again, and I'll give it another turn. Okay, I'm liking that a bit more. I'm going to go just a hair farther. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm liking that. All right, now I got the depth that I want. Okay, now I can adjust the crimp. But first, I'm going to raise the expander plug again, because I'm going to lower the whole die a little bit to crimp it. I don't want to push the bullet in farther than it needs to go. So I'm going to raise this about 3 turns. I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to turn this until I feel it contacting the shoulder. I'm going to bring this out. I'm going to turn this in just about a turn more. Now here's the thing. I'm going to be loading this with black powder. There's no crimp groove. Black powder likes a good crimp. It needs to build up its pressure. Smokeless, I could probably get away with the amount of crimp I got on here right now. But we don't want the bullet moving around under recoil, so we want to put a crimp on it. So let's see what we got here. Take a look at it. Okay, now I am barely getting a crimp on there. So I'm going to just turn it down a little bit more. Alright, so this is good and solid now. That bullet's not going anywhere. Alright, I don't have a real deep crimp, but I've taken a little bit of bite into the lead. And that should be good. So I'm going to run this back up, lock it in, and now I'm going to turn my locking ring again, and I'm going to lock this one in. Alright, now, remember we raised this up. I'll get that bullet right where I want it to go. It's crimped in place. So now I can turn this down, and when I feel it make contact with the bullet, that's right where I want it to be. Alright, so I'm going to pull this out. We've got our first dummy made. And it looks pretty good. Okay, before I go any farther, I want to be sure that this ammunition is going to fit in the chamber where it belongs. Ordinarily, I would use a bullet gauge for that. But this being an obsolete caliber, they don't make them. So what I've got is I've got my Harrington Richardson safety hammerless revolver in .38 Smith & Wesson. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if this will chamber. And it does. It chambers right in. Beautiful. I mean, it does not get any better than that. Now, if I had crimped it too much, I probably would have bulged and wrinkled it right at the top here. You can't always see that. I would have had to back off on the crimp a little bit. But that did not happen. Okay. So now I can feel pretty good about that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up the turret for auto rotate, and then I'm going to make one more dummy, and I'm going to make sure that we are good to go. Okay, let's run a case so it's full cycle and test it again, and then we'll see if we're ready. Okay, it looks good. Let's test it. Drops right in. Beautiful. Comes right out. Okay, we are done. Alright, that's how we set up dies for reloading the first time. I hope you guys found that helpful. I'll try to do some other what I'd call reloading 101 topics over the course of the winter. If you like this one and you want more, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to accommodate you. So in the meantime, I'll see you next week. Bye.